at that time, she actually was transitioning from one position into a more managerial position. And so when I was laid off, it really truly wasn't a big deal. The biggest thing was that we had a 3-month-old child who mommy was about to go back to work, and it was like, what's about to happen?
Welcome to my new video series, Don't Just Buy a House, Build a Home, where we believe that buying the dream home is just not enough to lead a happy life. That instead, it is in the quality of the relationships we form within those walls, as well as our community at large, where we ultimately find meaning and purpose. Today, we will be exploring the topic of stay-at-home dads. This has been a growing trend over the last few years. And according to the National At-Home Dad Association, there are about 7 million dads as the primary caregiver for children under 15 in the US. And although the numbers show that there is a growing interest for fathers to stay home with children and wives to work outside the home, there is still a stigma around dads who choose the caregiver route over the traditional provider path. So today, I'll be talking with the president for the board of directors of the Spokane Waldorf Education Association, Justin Thaxton, who among other responsibilities happens to be a stay-home dad himself. So Justin will be sharing with us his personal experience as the primary caregiver in the family, including challenges, the rewards of taking on such a role. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if you do, please consider subscribing to my channel. Now, without further ado, here it is, Justin Thaxton.
Right, Justin, my man. First off, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
I think we met about a month ago, roughly.
Uh-huh.
Both of our children go to the same school, and we got invited to one of the kids' birthday parties.
Oh, yeah.
And we connected and struck up a conversation, and quickly I learned about your commitment to your children and the fact that you are actually a stay-home dad.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I immediately said to myself, this is one guy I would like to get to know better. So
Yeah.
Here we are. So
Absolutely.
thank you for being here, buddy.
Oh, definitely. And also, just because I have to do my due diligence, quick shout
Yeah.
out, Windsong School. If you want to know about it, my man has a good understanding of it. So listen to what Alejandro has to say, because we're
Yes,
growing
sir.
and enjoying stuff.
Waldorf Education,
Yeah.
just the best community in
Yes.
town. So with that said, I think a good place to start is by offering some context and background. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how many kids you have, how long you've been with your lovely wife, and then from there we can just go into more specific questions about the topic of being a stay-home dad. So,
Absolutely.
right.
I'm Justin Thaxton, certified stay-at-home dad, president of the Spokane Waldorf Education Association, father of 4. Taylor, my oldest, is 7. Justice, my second, is 5, going on 6 in September. Peyton, who's currently our youngest, is 2. And then we have one on the way in November, which we're super pumped about. My wife's name is Geneva, and she is a nurse, which allows for me to be that stay-at-home character. The way that this all kind of got started for us, in truth, was COVID. It kind of started out of necessity. I was laid off at the beginning of COVID for obvious reasons, and it kind of led to us having the opportunity to have me stay at home with the kids. Now, what's cool for us is Geneva had the opportunity to stay home with the kids when I was working some years ago when Taylor was a baby. So she had the chance to stay home with both Taylor and with Justice. We moved a little bit. We were in the Midwest in Iowa, and we lived in Illinois, and we lived in Denver, and then we moved here, unfortunately for an emergency. But this has been a very, very cool journey to sort of understand and collaborate in terms of really raising our kids in a very, very intentional fashion. I think that's one thing that being a stay-at-home parent allows for you to do is raise your kids in a very stable, sustainable, intentional fashion. So that's sort of my beginning story. Worked in collegiate athletics for a number of years, love teams. So if you're sort of laughing at the number of kids I have, that's part of it. Uh, Trying to build a little bit of a basketball team. We got a couple more to go, but we're on our way, man.
Well, as a father of four myself, certainly I got nothing to laugh about. So I fully empathize with you, my friend.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that what uh, brought this about was COVID,
Mhm.
meaning you and your wife coming to the decision that for you to stay home with the kids was the best option for the family. So can you just tell us a little bit more about, uh, again, how you guys came to that conclusion?
Okay. So like I said, my wife is a nurse, she's frontline, she does her thing. She's very, very good at what she does. And at that time, she actually was transitioning from one position into a more managerial position. And so when I was laid off, it really truly wasn't a big deal. The biggest thing was that we had a 3-month-old child who mommy was about to go back to work. And it was like, what's about to happen? In truth, what I can honestly say is it felt like a godsend for that layoff to happen. It felt like I was just meant to be here. Um, I fought it for a while, to be perfectly honest with you. I've worked since I was 14 years old, and so 24 years at that point, and it's like, how do I all of a sudden just slow down and become this character that I've never seen in my life? Right? I have both of my parents; neither one of them did that. I don't think my grandparents did that. I don't know anybody as a male who is a stay-at-home parent. So it was very, very unique, and I think the way that it sort of manifested is Geneva wanted to be able to save a little extra money. That's how it always kind of starts with a lot of things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Financially, to make this move allows for us to save a few $100s or however much per month, and so financially, that's how it started. But I would say it turned into a real spiritual venture where I was able to come into myself a lot more, to remember that one of the things that I really wanted to do in this lifetime was to live my dream in front of my kids, to live my goals in front of my kids. And I think I had started to forget that in the working world. So being home really allowed for that shift to kind of come full circle for me yet again. And being with my kids, I guess, kind of allow for me to focus and rediscover my kid. So, I'm a little goofier now than I was before, which is great. I'm really enjoying rediscovering that part of myself and adding it into the little bits of so-called grown-up maturity that I have. And yeah, it's been a task, but it's also been quite a blessing.
Man, you just hit on so many things there. So you said that making the decision to stay at home with your kids, I mean, there were pragmatic reasons, financial,
Sure.
and so on. But also, you mentioned that it became a personal endeavor, meaning that spiritually you were able to reconnect with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Um,
Actually, let me speak more to that.
for
So I
sure.
think
Go
that
ahead.
one of the things about reconnecting to yourself and also being around your kids is, so I'm a huge fan of etymology in terms of words and where they come from, and like the origins of where they come from, not just maybe how we use them now. And the word fruition has become very, very important to me. And it has a couple of different meanings. The most common meaning is like to enjoy something, really, right? But then there's another common meaning, which is to bear fruit. It's the state of bearing fruit. Well, when you really put those things together, what you have is to enjoy the state of bearing fruit. If that doesn't sound like a family or being a parent, I'm not sure what does. So at the end of the day, I started to realize that fruition in truth is a place. It's a place that you go with your family, right? And that's the only way to get there, is to have this family connection and to allow for everybody to be exactly who they're meant to be, and head to this place called fruition where everybody gets to be important. That's all we want in as human beings, is just to be important. And quite honestly, I want my kids to, when they do go out into the world, I want them to feel like they're important, not necessarily just self-important or important to humankind, but that whatever their purpose is, the way they see it is very important to them. That other people and the purpose that they serve out in their life is important to them, and that they treat people according to the importance that they place on themselves. So fruition is a very, very important thing. I just want to throw that out there just in case we have a few conversations, that fruition is coming.
There we go. Part of my philosophy, both as a professional and personally, is actually my slogan for my business is don't just buy a house, build a home.
Yeah.
And by that I mean is that don't get caught up on buying the dream home, and for that matter, the nice things. True joy, meaning, and purpose, I believe, is found in relationships.
Absolutely.
Both the relationships you build within your house and also in your community at large. And you just touched on that, meaning that some of your perspectives changed going from the workforce to staying home with your children.
Yeah.
You realize that holding space for them to develop into who they were created to be became almost your life task.
Mhm.
So with that said, let me ask you, how did your values, if at all, change transitioning from a traditional role as a male who works outside the house to someone who works primarily inside the home?
You know, recently, I think it was actually you who asked me the idea between comfort and happiness, right? So you think about this idea of, do I want to be comfortable? Do I want to be happy? Do I want to have the things that I want, right? That I desire. Um, a lot of our lives as human beings is really just about pleasure and pain, right? I think at the end of the day, um, becoming this stay-at-home parent has allowed for me to see that happiness is a way of life. It has to do with you placing your love into the things that you actually care about, right?
Mhm.
Whereas comfort it can be a way of life, but it's really, I would say, a compilation of answers that we get from technology, from the Industrial Revolution, from all of these questions that we've asked. I think that comfort is great. Don't get me wrong; it has its place. But I wonder to myself often about whether comfort actually helps us to reach fruition, as I was speaking to before, right? Does it? I've really realized that happiness, in terms of my love for things, has to be the foundation of everything, right? And if eventually we reach comfort, I mean, okay, cool, then that's wonderful. But I truly feel like that discomfort, right, in ensuring that the people in your home, ensuring that the relationships are good, ensuring that um, you are who you're meant to be. I think that's a very, very important place. I think our parents tend to forget about themselves, which makes sense. I think you've probably heard this thought process. Well, I gave that up for you. Well, this is something I gave that up for you. And I'm trying to change that within the thought process around my children. What I would like to be able to say is I gave investment to you. Right. So, I mean, you're saying it in terms of your whole slogan. It's not just about the home. It's about what goes into the home. Right. I want to give my kids investment, and giving to them is very important. I would rather give it directly to them than have them force me to give up something, if that makes sense.
Right. You want to do it by choice,
Yeah.
not because you are coerced into or forced into
Yeah.
uh, giving up your personal goals so you can serve them. Because
Exactly.
eventually that's going to devolve into resentment,
Exactly.
I would assume.
Right. And honestly, I hear you. Like I said, words are one of those things that are very important to me. And you're right in terms of making a choice about it, but I really want to make a decision about it. Like, I think that there's a big difference between, picking through a bunch of choices and making that commitment, that decision, right? That decision to get there with your kids, the decision to, yell at a kid, the decision to understand a kid, the decision to, there's all these different decisions. I think that, and I don't want to negatively talk about anyone because, I think that people have done their best. I feel like every parent has done their best. But I think that in terms of parenting, we're starting to just come around to a place where we truly get how to parent human beings, if I'm being honest with you. I think that a lot of the trials that we've gone through over the past however many generations have taught us that we have to look inside, which I think is now why all of a sudden we have more men in particular who are leaving the workforce and saying, I want to go and be with my kids. Right? I need to understand who I am. And it seems to me like the only way for me to really truly do that is through my children. They remind me of who I am for whatever reason. So might as well be with them, right?
Dude, that is so powerful, and that is so true. Somebody once said, an expert actually said that being with your kids for 3 months is the equivalent of being in therapy for like 10 years,
Oh my gosh.
because they just
I've never heard
simply
that.
they just have this knack for um, bringing up any unresolved past trauma that you may have, that you have been suppressing for many years.
Yeah.
And I mean, they just have this ability to trigger you.
Right.
And
Man,
you know,
obviously I needed that 16 years worth of therapy, obviously.
yeah, no, man,
The last 2 years have been wonderful. They really, really have. And
yeah,
in truth, Alejandro, I think one of the things you're also speaking to is the idea of just self-wellness, man. Um, I think about some of my journey has been unique to the fact that I've lost 100 pounds, which I think a lot of that has to do with the emotional stress that I've let go of because of seeing the energy that my kids are able to generate all the time. Right. And they're not bogged down by this thought of, well, I got to go over here and go to work and I have to go and I have to do these meetings and I have to, jump on email and send these 35 emails back. They're not worried about those things. They are worried and only worried about, what do I need to do right now? How do I get to it? And that's pretty much it.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I envy that, man. Just the ability to be present. Just to be where your feet are, and that's in all honesty, that's a daily struggle for me. But one thing I wanted to just mention is that as we're having this conversation, we're coming from a place of being in the trenches with you as parents.
yeah,
Certainly, I'm still trying to figure stuff out
sure.
in this journey as a father. So we're not coming from a position of being an expert by any means. It's just the whole intention of or purpose for this conversation is just to incentivize again these talks around parenting, so we become more intentional about how we want to raise our children.
Yeah,
And also we're not trying to convince anyone to become a stay-home dad. Instead, I think what we're trying to do is just to put out there that we need to make decisions consciously as opposed to reflectively.
yes,
Or meaning that if you want to be a stay-home dad, make that decision consciously. If you want to be working outside the home, make that decision consciously, as opposed to being victim of societal pressures that
yes,
tell us what we should do, how we should live. Would you
yes.
agree with that?
I agree 1,000,000%. I think one of the things that I attempt to live by is this idea that as a parent, none of us, we don't get it right. A lot, 90,
We make a lot of
95,
mistakes, that's for sure.
100% of
Yeah,
the time. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, in terms of the things that we see, our kids see it differently, and that's okay. I think that the biggest thing is just be the change that you believed that you wanted to see in the world. Those things that you believed that you wanted your parent to do for you,
Mhm,
do those things, be those things. If
mhm,
you don't know how to do those things, learn those things.
mhm,
There are plenty of parents out here who have wonderful skills, who can teach those skills. And I truly believe teaching and learning. So I'm a teacher. That's my undergrad was in teaching. So understanding teaching, I'm starting to understand that that's probably the most important part of parenting is just trying to understand what a child is saying, really, and not make them feel like what they're saying is incorrect because it's not the proper grammar yet, or because it hasn't been fully, parsed out in their mouth and they just can't feel it right. Like
Yeah.
a 2-year-old and how they speak in certain ways.
Sure.
You have to give them that assurance that you're at the very least trying to understand. And when you
Yes.
do so, they will do the same for you. And it's very special when that starts to occur.
I have found that to be true
Yeah.
for sure. For the family that who is listening to this interview, who is contemplating the option for the dad to stay back home with the kids, um, for you, someone who is actually going through it right now, what advice would you offer, and also what misconceptions can you clear about the role of being a stay-home dad?
The only, so this is more of an opinion. Um, when you're raising your children, it's very important that you understand the partner that you're doing it with. And I think that's a very central thought process where we are doing this together. It can never be a stay-at-home parent doing it by themselves. I tend to think that in the past generations, there's a lot of women who understand that thought process, that they can't be the ones to do that on their own. I now understand that thought process also. I think that it has to be a conversation. It has to be a communication after it's a conversation. So moving it into the larger macro thought of how we do things in our home, we are raising our kids according to this thought. And if that's what you're going to do, like, it has to be something where there's an understanding of how everybody in the home was raised in truth, like a true understanding, like what are the pieces that you saw? What did you truly take from your parent? And then a collaboration of those thoughts. How do we really want to do this together? Um, it can be very, very spiky if you decide to not speak about it and simply just go through it without any proactive planning. So I would say one big piece is just ensure that you connect as parents first, and that there's an understanding of the possible triggers that could be in play. For men in particular, one of the things that I've really struggled with is this idea that as a man, I'm supposed to make a certain amount of money. And as I'm sitting at home, sure, I'm helping us save money, but I'm not necessarily making money. So I think that there's different ways that you can obviously answer that question. But it once again has to begin with a conversation, either a conversation or some sort of direction that you already have in a side hustle that you're really good at, whatever it may be. But understanding what you really need at home, understanding what the person who is working, if that's happening, is needing out in the world, and how those two worlds cross on a regular basis. And this is how I always look at it in my home is we have our world, absolutely. That is the Thaxton world, period, point blank. And everybody here is included in it. But there's 6 worlds within our world. Like, that's just how it is. And they have their own separate thought processes. So Taylor has his own, Daddy has his own, Mommy has her own, and everybody has their own. And we have to incorporate all of those things. We can't simply just say this is our world, but Daddy controls it or Mommy controls it. It does have to be something where we take some input and attempt to apply that input collaboratively as best as possible. That's the best advice that I can give.
Oh man, I love that so much. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I could go all day long
Man,
chatting about this. You just brought up an idea that's worth unpacking. I don't know if we have the time today, but I believe what you said, or my takeaway from what you just said was, even though we are a community inside, your home, each of us are still individuals, and as such, there needs to be space that's held for each one of us or your family to develop to grow into their own person.
absolutely.
And also, you mentioned that even though we're a group, it's not that me as a father or my wife, together as the parents, we're controlling this. It looks like you guys take the approach more of being a guide
Yes.
than being in a position of power. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I think I always look at it with the acronym of like a plant. Plants may grow inside of one planter. They may. You might see your home as one planter, but at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that all of your kids are the same plant. You're not the same plant. Your wife might not be the same plant. So it doesn't mean that everybody can grow in the same size planter. So sometimes it needs to be a little bit larger. The thought process in your home has to be larger for people to be able to grow into who they're meant to be able to grow into, and not just into the environment. That's
Mhm.
the part that's very, very important. People need to be able to grow potentially into who they're meant to be, right?
Mhm.
Who they feel they're meant to be, and not just the planter, the environment.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, just for the sake of time, I actually had like 10 more questions, but I'm going to cut it to three.
Okay, sounds good.
One is, how do you want your children to remember you?
I'd like for my children to remember that I was here. I think that's the change I wanted to be in the world from what I saw. My dad took a very, very hands off approach, which it took me a long time to understand why that was. But recently, I kind of started to get it, particularly being here at home. Um, I think I just want them to understand who I am. If they understand me, if they can verbalize, if they can act out, if they can um, have some sort of sense or feeling of who I was, of who I am, and take that with them and impact the world in a continuous generative way. I'm happy. That's all I expect from them. I just want them to be their best human beings, and affect this world in ways that have it change and inform to what their small minds know that we should be doing. I truly believe in kids. I think kids are really like the path by which we as grown-ups should understand that like they really are the future, and through being the future, if we truly want to see the best of who we can be as human beings, I think it's up to us to let our kids lead just a little bit more.
I love that, man. All right. This question uh, is not a sordid. I think is the right pronunciation there.
Mhm.
Uh, One is something that I believe all of us should be reflecting on more frequently, and that is our mortality.
Mhm.
So, with that said, let's say that you are on your deathbed, reflecting back on your life, based on where things are at today.
Ooh.
Will you be looking back filled with regret or uh, joy and pride for the life you led?
I think as long as I live the best of who I can be, it's always going to be joy and pride. I've had a lot of regrets in the past. I don't plan on having very many moving forward in the future. And that's because I think that, as you watch kids play, for instance, right? Like kids play is very informative. There's other than what we give to it as adults and as parents, there's no failure. There's no regret. There's no, there's doing it again and again and again and again and again and failure over and over and over and over again. But that's not what they call it. All right. It's just a try and it's an attempt and they just keep on moving. And to me, as long as we give our best in those attempts intentionally, I'm good. And that intentionally part, that's me. For some people, that's not necessarily their best. I mean, some people are a little bit more patient than I am. And I think that that's wonderful. You be you to the best of your abilities. And I think that that's what's important. So on my deathbed, as long as I can say that I've given it my all, which I feel like I'm definitely going to be able to say that, then I've shown my kids everything that they need to know.
I love that, man. Yeah. All right. Well, last question is for those parents out there wanting to connect with you, just to learn more about the uh, stay at home dad life, how can they reach you?
You can reach me at J_Thaxton at iCloud.com. I'm always available. I do have a handle, the People's Coach, which is not completely up quite yet, but it's on its way. One of the major things that I want to cover is this idea of parenting and have parents be very connected to their kids, in particular in this next generation. I think from a generativity perspective, meaning passing on the best of who we are. I think it's very important that parents and kids come together under a new thought process, being that kids have their independences and freedoms and truths, and those things should be understood just as much as the parents' freedoms and truths and intentionality should be understood. I think that this is where our families are needing to go. At least that's what it feels like to me. So I'm here to talk about it and reach out.
Awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much, man, for doing this interview. Like I said, I'm kind of disappointed that we have to end it here because, like I said, I can chat with you all day long. But
this won't be the last interview. I expect to be on here again. So
yes, sir. So I enjoyed it. I think a lot of people will too. Thank you once again, and for those of you watching, thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you again next week. Alrighty, make it a great day.